Okay. So it's natural, I think, for us to come to a meditation practice and try to define what a good meditation practice is and what a bad meditation practice is. But the problem is then we first, I talked about this a little this morning, but then we start to pigeonhole our practice. Um, and that's kind of a dangerous place to get into because, like I said, we put the practice in a box. Okay? And our practice can never go anywhere, or it can just go right there. So then what happens is like we go, it can happen for months or years where you're like, oh, that was a good practice. That was a good practice. That was a good practice. And it's the same good practice. You see? So that's the danger of falling into defining a session as a good session or a bad session. If you show up to meditation, the bell rings, it's a good session. Really. Because everything that happens between the starting bell and the ending bell is material that we can learn from, even if you're falling asleep. Because the falling asleep, we fall asleep in meditation because it's the only other state we know that's nonverbal, right? And so habitually, when we turn our minds off or start to quiet our minds, our body remembers that as being, oh, it's time to sleep now. so so but what happens then is we fall below thought. When we're falling asleep, we start to fall below thought, like that. And when we're meditating, we're transcending thought. We're rising above thought, which is why they feel so differently. They're both nonverbal states, but they have a much different qualitative experience. They feel completely different, right? So when you're falling asleep in a practice, you can start to know what that feels like. So what it feels like to fall below thought rather than rise above it. And then what happens is that you start to be able to navigate that. So you can choose. So when you start to, oh, that's what that is, I'll back up and go that road. So you don't have to take that fork, you take the other fork, like that. So it becomes a choice. That's good if people are using meditation to help fall asleep. The danger of using meditation to help fall asleep is then it really becomes a habit. Every time you go to meditate, you fall asleep. So if you do want to use meditation for a sleep aid, meditate a little, like a couple of hours before sleep, then do some activity before. It could be something small, like brushing your teeth, and then go to bed. But some activity in between the meditation session and going to bed. If it's simple, brushing teeth or making a phone call or getting on Facebook for 10 minutes, whatever. But it's something. So you don't just lie in bed and die, because then your body remembers that pattern. So yeah, so even falling asleep can be used as something to learn from in the meditation. So the sessions we typically judge as bad, we just need to look at them in a different light. The same way when you brought up the idea of not judging the sounds or just thinking of it as the crickets. Then we take away that, because it's the mind that makes it bad. Even, for me, karaoke is really, I'm very, how should we say, I'm a karaokephobe.
You're gonna have to face your fear.
Scrabble. Triple letter word score. So being a retired musician, it's really hard for me. Karaoke, it really rubs me the wrong way. But that's good for me to look at, and I did some of that tonight. It's like, where does this come from? And to really sit with the emotions behind that, and not analyze them a lot, but just allow this distaste to arise. Look at it, feel it, honor it, and let it go. You know, and it's funny because after that happened about 10 or 15 million times, uh, humor arose, and I started to almost laugh out loud. While I was guiding, I was like, I almost lost it.
They would say wait at some point. Well, the repertoire was kind of funny.
Yeah, they ended in a very strange note. But at least they ended.
When we ended.
Yeah. But it goes back to that the universe arises, our human being universe, the universe that we know and make sense of with this nervous system, arises in opposites, good and bad, light and dark, pain and pleasure. And those opposites, all opposites, are dependent on the other for its existence. You can't have the heads of a coin without a tail of a coin. You can't have an ocean with all waves, with all crests of a wave and no troughs, right? And it's the same in all of the human experience. Any quality of experience you can imagine has an opposite that's equally important for that experience. When you're laying in bed and you're laying on a very uncomfortable bed in a, you know, not this place, I love this place, but some of the places I travel to are pretty uncomfortable. It's like sleeping on a brick. And when you lie on a bed like that, and you're comfortable as soon as you lie down, because it's nice to lie down, right? Especially after a long day or whatever. And then about 7 or 8 minutes later, you're sore. And so then you flip to the other side, and that's comfortable for about 7 or 8 minutes. But it's only comfortable in comparison to the sore side, right? And so you keep flipping. And that's exactly what happens with our habit of grasping and pushing. I was noticing it today with the flies or the mosquitoes. It's because you swat them and they just come back. It's and it's so there's no. You start to be like, well, that's what it is. That's what it is. You surrender to it. And so, knowing that comfort is only comfortable opposed to discomfort, you can rest in both. You can allow the comfort to be there and you don't grasp at it because you know eventually it's going to become discomfort. And you don't push away the discomfort because you know eventually it's going to go to comfort again. And that's just how the human life works. It's the same with pain and pleasure. We feel pain only in comparison to the pleasures that we felt in the past. And we feel pleasure only in comparison to the pain that we felt in the past. So in that way we can stop grasping at pleasure and pushing away pain. We can rest and just allow that flux to happen. Flux is a good word. I like that word, flux. Because the whole universe is in flux. Right? There's nothing that's permanent. The only thing that's permanent exists in the imagination of the human being. That's it. Nothing's permanent in the universe. Everything's changing all of the time, including ourselves. It's very strange when you think about that because it's like the impermanent one is grasping at the universe to try to make the universe permanent. And that's what brings us suffering. So if we can just rest in that whole experience and just acknowledge the beauty of it, the beauty of change, the beauty of impermanence. It's what would life be like if it wasn't impermanent? Right? We all fear change, or particularly death. It brings a lot of sorrow and grief. But can you imagine the opposite? If life had no death, there was no death. We think we're overpopulated now. And what would the world smell like? So, to embrace even that aspect of life, death is what makes life possible. So it's why we're allowed to be alive now, is because people have died. And so we have to embrace all of the change, the whole flux, including our own impermanence, our own flux. And that's what that question is pointing at. When we ask the question, who experiences this, or what is experiencing this, those insight questions, it's pointing at our own impermanence. The idea that there's nothing that's experiencing this. It's just experience that arises. It's just the constant state of changing experience with no experience. The universe experiences this, if you want to have an experience, or if you need that. But there's no I that experiences this. The I is just another part of the experience. You can sense that in all of the senses. Like for hearing, for example. Like as you listen to me talk, hopefully, or listen to the crickets, can you tell where that hearing is? Where is that hearing taking place? Can you hear a hearer? No, right? It's just sound. There's no hearer there. There's just the hearing. As soon as you think there's a hearer, you separate into I, other. You create that duality. That duality is what causes suffering. So if we can rest just here, allow the hearing to be there. It's such a relief. Because now there's nothing to defend. There's nothing to puff up about. We relinquish the boundaries that cause conflict in our life. When we recognize that there's nothing to defend anymore. There's nothing to push against. And you can do that with all of the senses. When you touch something, where does that feeling happen? Does it happen in the fingers? Does it happen in the brain? Does it happen somewhere in between the fingers and the brain? Is it in this finger or this finger? It's just sensation arising. There's no one there feeling it. It's just an experience arising. Sight is a really good one to use that with. Because where does the seeing take place? If I hold this up, right? You all can see that, right? The phone. Where's the seeing taking place? Is it in your mind? Is it in the phone? Well, if I do this, you don't see the phone anymore. But there's still the experience of seeing. It can't be in the phone. If you close your eyes, the phone is still there. And other people would see it. Is it in between the eyes and the phone? Down. So using experience like that, in that way, ask yourself, who's experiencing that vision? Who's experiencing that self? And then that brings you to that same place. The place of no self, the place of everything in flux. It's just experience arising again, over and over again. We experience a self, this permanent I. Such a fallacy. And it's interesting because societies are built on it, that sense of I. Cultures are built on it. So that's why it's so scary and so challenging to look at that. When we ask those questions, it's like looking into the fog. What's that? What is he talking about? Of course, I'm experiencing this. What does he mean? But who is that I? Who's experiencing that I? Who's experiencing the sensation of I? That's the mystery of life. There's no answer to those questions. It's the mystery of life. And those questions have given birth to philosophies and religions. People write books on them. They become dogma. Wars are fought over. And then that becomes the I. Right? But when we can step back from all of that and really look, nothing there. It's just experience. We put a name on it, and we give it a passport, and we say, you can't go here. You have to pay this amount to go there. And we identify people by their names. How much money they have. Oh, that should be a sin. It is a sin if you take sin as the real definition of the word sin, which means to miss the mark. The Aramaic translation of sin is to miss the mark, to miss the point of life. That's sin. It's a sin that we don't recognize that the I is just experience. Thank you. There's nothing more to defend. There's nothing to be afraid of. So when we can rest like that in the present moment, noticing all of the flux. So there's a great cartoon actually. It's very descriptive of this feeling. The cartoon starts in one frame. It's three figures. I think it's a dog and maybe a cat and a human being. And they're walking down a path and they fall over a cliff into a pit. And the second frame after they fall. They're all freaked out, panicked, as they're falling, as people would, pardon me, as they're falling. In the frame after that, they're still a little bit panicked, the sweat's coming out, and one thought bubble is like, holy XXY, XY, and all that. And so they're still freaking out. And then a couple of frames later, they're getting calmer and calmer. And the last frame, they're still falling, and they're playing cards while they're falling. Because that's what that experience like, the experience of recognizing that everything's in flux, including the what we think of as I. That's also in flux. There's nothing solid. And that's what it feels like, falling, 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 but then you realize there's nothing to hit the ground. There's no I that's going to hit the ground. And so you become very comfortable with that sensation of falling. Because falling is only scary when there's a ground to hit, right? So yeah, recognizing the flux, the I. There's nothing in experience that you can point to and say, that's me, right? Is there anything that you can point to in your experience and say, that's me? Anything that's not changing, that's solid? You look inside the human body and it's all constantly changing. You cut people open and there's no I in there, right? It's like opening a radio and expecting to see Mozart. Right? So where is this I? Where is this I that we fight wars over? And we tell people, you're not welcome here, over this I. And do amazing, horrible atrocities in the name of the I. Where is this I? Doesn't exist. Amazing. It's the wrong question. Because as soon as you ask, where is this I? You've applied the concept of time and space to something that's timeless and spaceless. You've asked for a location in time that has no location in time. There is a self, if you wish to label it, but it's beyond time, beyond space. It comes through in every sentient being, radiating through the life force of the universe. You can see it in every sentient being's eyes. Because if you notice the difference, right? If they're alive, you see the light in their eyes. And when they die, the light's gone, right? That's the self. Timeless and spaceless and totally dimensional. Inhabiting everything. This, it's in this bench. It's in this hat. Everything. It's all around us. That was Einstein's great insight. E equals mc squared. Energy is matter. All of this matter is just energy, the same life force that's in all of us, all of the time. The human nervous system freezes it into space-time events, which is a miracle. It's allowed us to create this whole universe. So, I guess my point is to really try to be comfortable with the flux. Life is change. Yes, change brings sorrow, like often. Embrace the sorrow, recognize the sorrow. Don't cling to it. Just let it rise and pass, just like everything else. And just rest. There's nothing to get uptight about. That's all I have to offer tonight. Are there any questions or comments or anyone want to talk about anything while this is our last night together?
That was nice to hear because that's what I was like trying to tell myself all day. Like you're supposed to experience these sorrows to feel happy, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just life, and
Yeah.
accept it and push it away. Just trying to do that like all day. It's nice to hear.
Good. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Resting.
So you do oral and visual fields. What about scent, for example?
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. I don't use the sense of smell in this meditation because it's one of the minor senses. It's not, unless we're blind or deaf, it's not one of the senses we use typically to make sense of our world, to map out our world. So that I use, pardon me, the sense of touch, which is the senses of the body, the sensations of the body, rather. The sight and the sound, because those are typically what we use uh, to map out our world. We're labeling and navigating our world. So that's why. But if you're, when I was saying, I was in the train station in India, and the odors are, I don't know if you've been to India. You have, right? Yeah, it's quite the place as far as the odors go, and in many other ways too. It's very rich in that way. Sensory experiences incredible there. So it was easy to use smell as part of the practice there. And if you're sitting in a place where there's somebody's mowed the lawn recently, or near a kitchen, like the other night we had the smell of chili coming through the practice, and we could have used that as part of the practice. So if there are really obvious odors, by all means, use them in the practice.
Chris, were you going to discuss the meaning of the repetition? Why we think it's necessary?
Yeah, sure, good, yeah. Well, traditionally, meditation is taught orally, and that's how I'm teaching it, and that's how I was taught. So it's a part of the tradition. First of all, that's one of the reasons why we keep doing that. So we keep repeating, so it sticks in the memory like that. So when you leave here and you go to do your own practice at home, it'll be very easy for you to recall all of the steps, all of the, you know, the whole meditation will be there in your mind. I did try to alter a little bit here and there. Maybe you didn't notice, which is fine too. That's good. It was really for my own entertainment. But um, yeah, the repetition is so that it makes it much easier to establish your own home practice.
Okay, so there's not an immediate reason like that we, let's say if we're meditating all day, then most likely we'll easily fall back into that state. I mean, is there a shorter version? That's what I mean.
Of the practice, you mean?
Their body scans are different lengths, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that does happen when I do other practices. I use when I'm teaching, I use this practice as groundwork for other advanced practices, and that's how it's done in the Tibetan tradition. Because this practice is really good for cultivating that awareness, because we keep getting distracted and coming back, keep getting distracted, coming back. So that practice is cultivating a really high level of attention and awareness. So when that attention and awareness is really accrued or strong or deep, we can use that attention to power other practices, such as working with anger, or such as working with any powerful emotion. Or there are some practices that you work with different behavioral aspects, different like lying, killing, stealing, things like that. We use those behaviors as meditation topics. But that can only be done when there's a really high level of attention cultivated. And so to come back to your question, I guess, we would do this practice for a while as it is, the long version, with the body scanning and everything. And then when I'm doing an advanced practice like that with people, I do a very quick body scan, because they already have the attention cultivated already. Yeah. Yeah. If you read any of the early texts, uh, they're really repetitive. I don't know if you've had that experience, but the early translations into English of the Dhammapada or the early Buddhist writings are horrible. Because it's pages and pages and pages and pages of the same thing over and over again. And it's because the translators translated right from the oral tradition. And so now we have translations that, thankfully, the compassionate translators edited all that out and said, okay, you just need to know this. So that's better. So now we have one page instead of like 54 pages. So, yeah. But that's kind of the tradition, that repetition. Any other questions or comments? Is it bonfire time? Yeah. Well, thanks. It's been a great experience. Really lovely. And you guys are amazing. Really. We had some really challenging moments. Everyone. We all did, including myself. And we were able to do it gracefully, beautifully, in presence, with mindfulness. It's not easy. It's not easy to come away for 2.5 days to be with oneself and to work on oneself. It's a powerful thing. Just to sign up for something like that is powerful. So you have earned the pat on the back, the celebration, if you choose to celebrate, however you choose to celebrate. You've earned it. Yeah. Keep up the great work.
No, just wasn't I to congratulate, right?
That's right.
There's no one to congratulate.
There's no one to congratulate. That's right. Or just the experience of being congratulatory.
Oh my God.
Good. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.